Someone made a comment to me. They said, think about how much cognitive time this person spends on just thinking about survival that you just don't have to do. And they used a perfect example. When you go to the grocery store and you have a full grocery basket, if you walk up to someone who's barely making it or is, barely making it, basically, you can ask them about any arbitrary item in that grocery store and they'll know down to the cent how much it costs, including the tax. But if you ask me anything that I buy in the grocery store, I can never remember what it costs
Right.
because it doesn't
Yeah. Yeah.
matter.
Well, it brings up a third group of theorists or philosophers that I've drawn on quite a bit, who are Nira Yuval Davis and Marcel Stotzler. And they wrote a very interesting article about what they call the situated imagination a number of years ago, which I've drawn on quite a bit. And in that article, they talk about the fact that, not everyone's imagination is the same. I mean, your imagination is shaped by your life experience. And we can think about the imagination in this sense is who and what do you think is valuable and what do you think is possible? For lots of people who have experienced, nothing except economic pain and suffering for their whole life, their sense of what is possible, real or what's right, is shaped by that experience. And meanwhile, for those of us who've enjoyed a great deal of privilege and wealth, our imaginations are shaped by that experience too. Their other point is that our imagination is shaped by our bodies, whether our bodies are gendered or how our bodies are gendered, how our bodies are racialized, how our bodies experience movement in the world, depending on if we have what sort of disabilities we have. All of these things are going to affect what we imagine is valuable, what we imagine is important, what we imagine is possible for ourselves as individuals and then collectively for society. And for them, they're interested not so much in everyone getting together and having the same imagination of what's possible. Like, well, we need this sort of revolution, or we need this sort of social change, or we need this sort of policy. They really are insistent that we need to create spaces where our imaginations can have dialogue, without the idea that all of our imaginations are going to get on the same page, they're going to be synchronized. Rather, we just need to create sort of spaces and then find possibilities for solidarity and possibilities for social transformation. And I think that's happening all the time in social movements, good social movements at least. They're saying, okay, this is an alliance of a lot of different people with a lot of different concerns around racial justice, around gender justice, around economic justice. How are we going to bring these people together and really start to strategize about how we're going to work together towards some sort of bigger transformation?
Now, here's what you said that I want to key in for a second. You said how people are their imagination of what is possible. Talk about like how our belief in what is possible kind of translates into like what we try to build or create, or even how we feel like this institutions could be shaped or maybe not changed.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's incredibly important. I mean, I think that we do a lot of work every day to tell ourselves that lots of things are impossible. I'll just give you one example. All debt could be erased tomorrow. It could literally happen through, a few strokes on keypads. I mean, all of our debt, all of the debt that any country owes, all of the debt that today is being used to destroy a country like Haiti, or extort all of the resources from a country like Namibia, or from a country like Kenya, or from all of the debt that's now being used to torture Greece or to torture Portugal. All of this debt, and then all of the debt of all of the students who went into debt to get their education, who should have never been forced to go into debt in the first place, all of that could be erased tomorrow. The only person it would really hurt would be major financial institutions and maybe some rich countries. But it probably wouldn't even hurt them that much. They'd probably survive it. But just saying that is such a radical leap of imagination for many people that I think it indicates just how limited our sense of what is possible is. But I always want to insist that, in fact, thinking it's impossible is an act of the imagination. Because why is it impossible? Why is it impossible to have full universal health care for every single person in the United States? It exists in many countries. Why is it impossible to have an even distribution of wealth, for instance, which has long time been a demand of many different social movements? movements? Why is it impossible to think about disarming or even disbanding the police? Other countries have disarmed their police, and several communities work without police. These are radical ideas, but they're only radical in the sense that we think that they're so completely impossible that we close our imaginations off from their possibility. Even if you don't agree with these policy ideas, that we would have universal health care, that we would forgive all debt, that we would abolish the police, that we would have some sort of more equal system of economics. Maybe that isn't your cup of tea. I think there's a value to keeping your imagination open to the idea that, of course, it's possible. We just need enough people to believe it's possible and enough people to believe that it's necessary so that they're willing to come together and fight for it.
I think, oh, it looks like we lost him for a second there. But to actually get on the tail end of what he just said, I think basically, if there's nothing physically limiting you, like basically, of course, you can't go outside and fly to the moon or something like that. Maybe that's not possible per se, but things that are impossible for reasons that are not of the physical world, I think that should all be open to discussion. Like, he just mentioned eliminating all debts. There's nothing saying you can't do that. Debt is fictitious. It's a complete figment of institutions, right? It doesn't really exist per se. It's just an existence that we make into existence. So there's nothing saying that we can't just wipe it all out and basically do something different with it.
Well, I think that essentially the certain alternatives are completely impossible or not worth thinking about is very dangerous, because the radical imagination for me means not settling for the conventional understanding of what is possible. It means really digging back into questions about the nature of value itself. Who is valuable? What is valuable? Why are we living the way we're living? Why do certain power structures in society exist? And when you begin asking those questions on, I think, a really deep and fundamental level, what you get is a set of really radical proposals for a different sort of society. And I think those sorts of proposals or those sorts of ideas really need to be thought through and explored and entertained. Because otherwise, if we're simply accepting reality and the sort of social reality as it's given to us, a lot of people fall through the cracks. There's no reason, for instance, anyone should have to be homeless in just society that's ever existed. And somehow, simply because we don't think carefully and we question that idea that will allow there to be homeless people, many people are suffering incredibly, simply because of complete failure of the imagination.
I spoke about this while you were out. I spoke to the audience. I said, you can't fly to the moon because human beings can't defy gravity. But there's no reason why we can't reshape and change the structures that we create.
Yeah, we did fly to the moon as a human species, and we'll do many other amazing things, and we'll do them not because we said, well, it's impossible to fly, so we'll never go to the moon, but we said, okay, it is impossible to fly, that's a reality, but we know all of these we have all of this scientific information, we have all of this technology. How can we take this fundamental goal of getting to the moon and move towards it? And it took people to be able to say, actually, this is a valuable and worthwhile effort in order to make us move from the realm of the imagination to the realm of the possible. Now, the moon landing is perhaps a bad example because it was essentially funded and driven by sort of a Cold War competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it was funded and much of the technology was sort of gobbled up by arms companies. So maybe it's not a great example, but other great struggles in history are. I mean, I would just take, for example, something I learned about very recently, which is the socialist candidacy of Upton Sinclair, the famous American novelist who ran for governor of California during the Great Depression. on a really radical agenda, and actually had many resonances with the Bernie Sanders campaign that just concluded in the United States. You know, Sinclair, a great novelist of the American working class, you know, documented migrant worker experience in the United States, the experience of farmers during the Dust Bowl. He ran on a platform that included sort of radical ideas as nationalizing Hollywood. So Hollywood would become a dream factory by the people and for the people, which today just seems completely wild. But when you start to think about it, has a certain logic or a certain sense to it. I don't know if I agree, but it's certainly interesting.